Have you ever looked at a podcast title and thought, I have no idea what this podcast is about. Why did they name that? You are not alone. I have also felt like that. And even though I say quite often and frequently that I am not always the best at naming things, you know exactly what you're getting when you see what I've named something. So, for example, you've got Successful Podcasting Unlocked. You know exactly what that podcast is about. Listeners to Leads, you know what that podcast is about. Two sisters and a cult, super clear. But if you're someone who maybe wants to go a little frillier or you're not even sure where to begin, how do you know how to name your podcast and how important is it actually? Hello and welcome to another episode of Successful Podcasting Unlocked. I'm your host, Alicia Galati. I am the founder of Galati Media, a full-service podcast management agency where we help business owners launch and maintain lead-generating shows. We have launched over 25 podcasts at this point, and we have been integral in helping our clients come up with podcast titles. Now, some of them do come to us and they say, this is the title I have in mind. And you know what we do? We do some market research first. We make sure that it's aligned with the listener, with the brand, and if it's actually taken. So today we're going to answer the question of how important is a podcast name? I recently had a friend come to me and say, please answer this question on the podcast because I need to know. I'm shifting my podcast from this to this, and I have no idea. I've been brainstorming all of these title ideas, and I have no idea where to start. I want to start by answering one part of this. How important is the name? While the name is very important, it is not the end-all, be-all. You will find the right people are attracted to your content. And as long as you are putting in high quality content into your podcast, they will find you, they will resonate with you, and it doesn't matter what your podcast is titled. That said, your podcast title name does matter. So where can you get started? The first thing you're going to want to do is think about what I tell you always to do, that market research. So who is that listener? What is the content going to be about? And how are you going to maybe show up a little differently than those in your industry? Once you've answered those questions, it allows you to come up with a few more ideas of titling your podcast. Now, I have named my podcasts something very specific and to the point. Two Sisters and a Cult is my first podcast with my sister. I've got Listeners to Leads, which is the sister podcast to this. And that is where I interview podcasters who are kind of going through their podcasting journey or they've turned listeners into leads. I offer strategic support in being able to do that. And then this one, Successful Podcasting Unlocked. In each of those, you are very clear. Once you read the title, you know exactly what you're getting going in. This allows me to easily market and promote the episodes and the podcast without having to explain, oh, it's the Alicia Galati show. Well, what the heck is that? I've never heard of Alicia Galati. Who is she? It's none of that. It makes it super easy. Let's talk naming it your name. So this is something that I've seen people do. If you're trying to build a brand around your name and you've already built a brand around your name, go ahead, name it whatever you want. Name it, if you're a celebrity and you want to name it I don't even know. I can't come up with any names because I'm terrible at naming things. I'm not terrible at naming things. I keep saying that. That's actually not true. I'm great at naming things when it's being named something practical and to the point. That is how I name things. So if you want to name it whatever you want to and you're a celebrity and you want to use your name, go ahead. If you are not a celebrity, you're probably better off being able to very quickly and efficiently articulate what the podcast is going to be about and just use that title. Now, you're probably wondering, well, what about SEO? If someone searches my name, will my podcast come up? As long as your name is in the artist part of the back end of your podcast, people will be able to find you on the podcast listening apps as well as other places. If they type in your name and podcast, they should be able to find it. But you have to consider if your brand tends to use certain types of words or if your listeners tend to use types of words when they're searching for things, those are going to be words that you're going to want to consider putting into your title. Also, once you hit 25 episodes, feel free to change it. It's okay to evolve your podcast. We're humans. We are evolving constantly. We're changing and learning constantly. With over 200 episodes that I have personally recorded between all of my podcasts, I am not the same person that I was when I recorded that very first episode. And so I can't expect that the content that I create is going to be the same. And I can't expect the naming of what I've created to be the same either. So allow it to shift with you, but give yourself 25 episodes. That puts you in a pretty decent percentage of people who have made it. So once you hit 25, then consider maybe you want to change your podcast title, your format, your cover art, the style of your show. That is okay. But give yourself that window. So what can you live with as a title for 25 episodes? First thing you're going to want to do is brainstorm. Like I said, think about what it is that your listeners are expecting, are looking for, some words they use. Make sure that it's clear. I have seen people title their podcast things that are maybe industry-specific verbiage that it doesn't resonate with everyone. Now, that's great because that allows them to be able to stand apart and separate themselves from other people who are talking in broader terms. But it's up to you to decide, how do I want to do this? Do I want to attract a certain group of people? Are those my people? Do they understand these terms? Yes, awesome, great. That is the title I'm going to use. Once you've kind of determined that, the next thing you want to do is check if it's available. There are almost 3 million podcasts out there. Now, what that means is that the name that you're coming up with might already be out there. So go and check. I like to do a simple Google search, but then I also go through places like Listen Notes, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Look at those different places to see, are there podcasts out there that people have already used that name? If so, move on to the next. So give yourself a list of 10, I would say, at least 5 to 10 names that you are okay with, that you feel comfortable with. Once you've whittled that down, then you can ask close friends. I have seen people ask followers. I've seen them ask other people that are maybe not their ideal listeners. Here, it's important that it's a name that you feel really comfortable with, but also resonates with your listeners. So your listeners are a great group of people to ask. They might not always have the greatest opinions though. So go with your gut, go with what feels right for you. Then try to say it out loud. So can you say listeners to leads? Can you say two sisters and a cult? Can you say successful podcasting unlocked? I couldn't say it earlier and I had to re-say it, but usually I can say it. You need to be able to determine, is this something that I can say? Here's a great example. One of my friends, Donald Dunn, was on my podcast, Listeners to Leads, and we talked about the evolution of his brand and the evolution of his podcast. And I remember sharing that when he reached out to have me on his podcast, I saw the title of his show and I thought, I don't think that's for me. I don't think that's the kind of show that I would probably be on, or I don't think that's the kind of show that I'd be interested in listening to. So his podcast used to be named Two Drunk Dudes in a Gun Room. Now, what that podcast title did is it attracted the right people, the right listeners. And so it really was two guys drinking in a gun room. They were sharing stories as veterans, being out of war, being out of the military, what that felt like, what that looks like, and therapeutically processing it, and also feeling like, this is shifted. So a few years into the podcast, he realized the co-host had left and that name didn't align anymore. Not only was it not two dudes anymore, but they weren't really getting drunk. He still likes his spirits, but it's not about that anymore. So he was able to shift the podcast from Two Drunk Dudes in a Gun Room to Spirits and Stories with Donald Dunn. And that aligns with his brand more and his evolution as a podcaster. It has his name on there. It still has that spirits part, but it has that stories. And it allows him to be able to share the transformation that podcasting and therapy has allowed him to have in his life. And that wouldn't have been how he felt at the very beginning. So you have to really be in tune with yourself as a podcaster. Yes, this is how they were feeling then when they launched it, and it made sense to have that title. But the evolution of the show shifted. And so he had to come up with a decision of, do I keep it? I've already invested in this huge neon sign behind me, or do I change it? And he changed it. So that gives you an example of the ability to use a show and attract the right types of people, to use the title of your show to allow it to speak to your listeners with exactly what it is that they would expect and how you're going to show up, and allows you to evolve as a person, as a host, to change it to whatever you want. I hope this was helpful in allowing you to understand exactly what it is that you can do to show up as an expert, to show up as yourself, create incredible content, and not stop people from listening just because of your title. Also, it's okay. You can change it later. Get something that's going to work and works for the content now. Be clear, not quippy. Get it out there. And if you decide that you are kind of hashing out some title ideas, you want to send me a DM and ask me my opinion, I'll try to give you my opinion. I'm happy to, though. So please send it my way. You can also send any and all of your podcasting questions to alicia.galati on Instagram, or go to successfulpodcastingunlocked.com. Until next time, happy podcasting.